What's good, boxing fans? Episode 13 of the Slip and Weed podcast coming at you. Let's get it. Right now with the schedule, guys, so that's a big part of why I'm sort of posting on random days right now, is because boxing doesn't exactly have like the standard boxing schedule right now. Normally, in a normal boxing world, Saturdays are really when the fights are, the big fights, and maybe on Friday there's a smaller card that, with prospects and whatever. But with the way things are going right now, these fights, they could be on a Tuesday, they could be on a Thursday. There's shows on Sundays right now, so they're so scattered all over the place. And now ESPN and Top Rank are not the only promotional outlet that are putting on fights. Just since the last podcast, Eddie Hearn has started doing fights in his backyard. PBC put on a couple of cards on Showtime. So boxing, I think Frank Warren actually put some cards on too on ESPN Plus. So boxing is coming back quickly. I think all the promoters sort of saw how Top Rank did what they did and are trying to follow suit. Before I get deeper into any of this, I just want to wish one of my personal favorite fighters, Jorge Linares, a safe recovery. He tested positive for COVID-19 this week, and I had read on ESPN that he's in the hospital. So I'm hoping he's doing all right, and that it's not hitting him too hard, and that we can see him back in the ring really soon. One of my favorite guys to watch fight. So on August 1st, that was the very first card of backyard boxing, basically. So the way it's set up in Eddie Hearn's backyard. They're doing real matchroom promotion, DAZN fights in Eddie Hearn's backyard. And he's basically got a walkway, for ring entrances from the entrance of his house down to the ring. He's got this gigantic, beautiful backyard that's like in the hills. And basically the ring is, it's in a gazebo. It's got a platform above it that's covering the ring. And to be honest with you, it looks cool as shit. And when it gets dark, he's got some sort of light show going on. There's lights that pan across the house and along the lawn, so they can sort of pull out in between fights, and it's almost like the screensaver, because they don't have commercials on DAZN. So it's just this cool setting for the commentators to preview the next fight. That first card they did, I noticed that the PPE was really dope, man. Everyone had masks and face shields on. The second one, which I'll talk about in a little bit, that was not as much the case. I started noticing that people's masks were, down below their nose, around their mouth, and even if you have the face shield on, if it's not on properly, you're really not doing that much. It's really just there for show. So, I would kind of hope that, because we want to keep the sport going, and it seems like it's one of the only sports that can be done safely right now because it's not a team sport. So I would just, I would hope that everybody involved in these fights would want to help, make it so that the fights can continue and it's not just their fighter that has the opportunity. So mask up, people. Let's go. So that first card, man, he had some really, really nice talent on this card, man. It was a nice mix of fighters, nice mix of styles. The first guy that I watched was this guy, I believe his name is Jordan Gill, a featherweight, fought a guy named Reese Bellotti, quite a bit. He was a little bit limited, but he was a good, come forward, busy fighter, and Gill was just a really slick boxer. He looks kind of like Apollo Creed, and he's got that same kind of moving, flashy style. And he was really impressive, and it was a great way to start this brand off. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, right? I mean, it's a brand. this brand of boxing got kicked off with this fight. And I was very impressed. Gill's feet were super coordinated. It's very rare that he gets hit at all. His face was, basically clean on the other side of the fight. He's nice and long, especially for a featherweight. Featherweight being 126. He's nice and long. He uses his length. His feet are tremendous. So I would definitely think that Jordan Gill, I think he's young too. He's like maybe 25, 26. And I think you might see him in the mix shortly. Featherweight's got a lot of talent, but, I would love to see him in. That might not be a bad fight for Shakur Stevenson, just to test his IQ and, have the experience of trying to fight somebody else that's really slick. The second fight they had some nice heavyweights. This guy, Fabio Wardley, really big guy. It's funny because relative to a lot of the modern heavyweights, he's really not that big. He's like 6'5", 230. All these other guys are, sometimes 6'6", 6'7". Tyson Fury 6'9". They're all 240 plus. But he's a big, strong, athletic guy. And he knocked out a guy named Simon Vallily. Sorry, I had to take a look at that name again. I don't normally have to do that because I check. But yeah, Simon Vallily, who was pretty good, but he didn't seem explosive enough, or like he had enough offensive firepower or size to get inside on this guy Wardley. But there's a lot of really good young heavyweights right now. And this new class of guys in the post-Klitschko era, it's getting to be really stacked, man. It's getting to be a fight at the top. And I think we're coming into a golden age of heavyweights. You look at all these amazing young guys, man. Daniel Dubois. There's a guy, Jared Anderson, that they've been having on ESPN. I talked about him on the last episode. Very explosive, athletic, big kid. He's like 20. There's a lot of heavyweight prospects right now that are going to be looking for that slot, looking for the Joshuas and the Furies and the Wilders. They're going to be looking for those fights soon, and they're going to be a problem for all of those guys. I promise you that. And I think this guy Fabio Wardley could be one of those guys too. I would say the most impressive guy on the card was a guy named Dalton Smith. I believe he's a lightweight, and either a lightweight or a junior welterweight. He's kind of short, he's like 5'6". And the guy he was fighting, Nathan Bennett, was very tall for the weight. I think he might have been, 5'10", 5'11". And normally you would think, shorter guy, he's going to want to, cut the distance, get on the inside, and stay on the inside. But this guy, Dalton Smith, man, he is a very, very slick operator and spent the whole fight kind of on the back foot from the outside. And his style is like what I like to call like an aggressive counterpuncher, where, you see somebody like a Mayweather, he'll make you miss and he'll throw like one pretty hard one and get out. Whereas this kid, he's moving, he's on the outside, he's on the back foot, and the minute he makes you miss, there's like 3 or 4 fast, hard body shots coming at you. And he just breaks these guys down because he throws these shots and then he gets out and he's not willing to engage. He's on the move. He's on his jab. He's sort of cruising through the round. And then the minute you take a risk, he makes you pay for that risk so hard. And he stops this guy in the fifth round because, he just, every time the kid would try to throw a jab or let his hands go even a little bit, he would just get cracked in the body so hard 3-4 times. And eventually they started going upstairs and he was just blasting this kid in the head. So I would definitely keep my eyes out for Dalton Smith. I think as a stylist and with how sharp he is and how frustrating he is because he's not aggressive at all. Aggressive, I mean front foot. He's not a front foot kind of fighter. You have to kind of go look for him. And then when you try to get him, that's when you pay for it. I think he's risky business for anybody at junior welterweight, and it looks like he hits really hard. So, yeah, check out Dalton Smith versus Nathan Bennett if you can. If you have DAZN or if you have YouTube, I think this kid is a very special talent. There was one more fight before the main event. It was a guy named James Tennyson against Gavin Gwynn. James Tennyson, 27-3, 23 knockouts. The only other time I had seen him fight was against Tevin Farmer, and he got stopped to the body. Anybody who's watched Tevin Farmer fight knows that he has very few KOs, and it's not necessarily because he doesn't hit hard. It's just more his style, that he's a non-aggressive defensive counterpuncher. He's a little bit like more on the Mayweather end of counterpunching, where it's a minimalist thing. It's not like he makes you miss and then, he throws one good one. That's actually more how Farmer is. He's kind of a one punch and out kind of guy, maybe two, but he rips his body shots really hard. And if you press the action, he'll keep you in the pocket. And Tennyson's the kind of guy that really presses the action. So he pressed the action on this kid, and, this kid was no Tevin Farmer. He didn't have the skills to get out of the way and, to move his upper body. And Tennyson hits really hard, man. If you want to slug on the inside with him, good luck. And I think he's moved up to lightweight now. He looks more filled out and strong, and youthful. At least that was how it felt. He looked just a little more athletic and youthful in this fight than I ever remembered him. He's kind of easy to hit, and so that's going to be his problem, is that he's not terribly hard to find, but he can really crack, man. So if you don't have those skills, if you don't have those Tevin Farmer slick kind of skills, and you let him invade your space and make contact, he's a problem. He's definitely a problem. And then the main event was Ted Cheeseman and Sam Eggington. Anyone who knows UK British boxing probably knows both of these guys pretty well. I think Eddie Hearn likes them both a lot, so you see them on his cards a bunch. This was a great matchup, man, and the fight turned out to be an absolute classic. They really stayed in the pocket and traded shots for the whole 12 rounds. It was, there was some boxing going on, but it was really kind of a toe-to-toe throwdown for most of the fight. The difference kind of ultimately was that Cheeseman just offensively has more things he can go to and has a more reliable defense. He throws nice little touch shots. He doesn't put full power on everything he throws, whereas Eggington kind of does. But the way Cheeseman would get him on the ropes was, Eggington would sort of start backing up, and he'd throw 3-4 really light ones, kind of pitter-patter, but he would place them in different places and then let one go really hard, and it generally would land, and it would force Eggington back, and he would just keep throwing these pitter-patters and then mix in something really hard. And it was very effective, and Eggington spent more time than not being on the defensive and trying to evade what Cheeseman was doing. I don't have any idea really where these guys fit into a world-class level, but as far as local attractions, they were definitely the biggest names on the card. At 154, I think Cheeseman, maybe can get to a certain level. I don't see, he's a young guy, he's 24, 25, but I don't see how he does with, the Jarrett Herds and the Rosarios and the Charlo brothers. I don't know how he fits in with that mix. I don't think he does, but I think he probably beats anybody that's not the elite of the division for the most part. I think, and as far as British guys, I think regionally he could be the British junior middleweight. So that whole card, man, that was a cool experience. I really enjoyed watching that. And I hope that, the one that they do this weekend, that, everyone's just a little more aware of the PPE and that their masks are up and that their face shields are all the way down. I know it's hard for your fighters to hear you and whatnot, but, we want to keep the sport going. That's the whole thing, is to keep the sport going. And it's up to each fighter and each team to help facilitate that, to not pass it around to each other, not pass it around their gym. We see with Jorge Linares, I read his manager say that he does have symptoms, like he's not feeling well, and he's being quarantined at a hospital. These are the real consequences of making these choices, is that on a certain level, there are people that are going to pay for it. Hopefully, it's as few people as possible and it can be prevented. And all of the testing that we're doing, there's so many fights that have been canceled because there's so much testing. And thankfully, that fighter having it, when they're taken out of the facility, they're not able to spread it to anybody else. But, on the flip side, it is scary. It seems like only a matter of time before somebody doesn't handle it well. And I hope that Jorge Linares is not that guy and not that example, because I really enjoy watching him. So, yeah. Anyway, there was that same night on the 1st, there was a fight in Thailand between Srisaket Sorungvisai, who was the guy to beat Chocolatito twice. And he won a decision against a guy, I might be getting this wrong, but I believe his name is Amnat Ruenrong. Also a Thai fighter, very slick, fast fighter. I think they said that he was about 40, but he had very good hand speed, and I think Sorungvisai was caught off guard by it. And it took him a few rounds to get going. Before I talk about the fight anymore, I have to reference the fact that when the fighters would walk into the ring, in I believe this was in Thailand, every time they would walk in, there was this strange clap track playing that just sounded like 85 people clapping. And anybody that's been to a fight knows that's not what it sounds like when somebody's walking into the ring. It's not just like uniform clapping sound the entire time they come out. It was very synthetic looking and strange. And I'm noticing sports starting to do this synthetic crowd noise thing. We got to stop doing that shit because it's so fucking weird. There's nobody in there. And we don't need to pretend that there's a lot of people in there for it to, to be a real event. This is what we're doing right now. So the fighters walking in the ring and hearing all of this random fucking clapping, that shit's got to stop. I noticed that even on the PBC card that I'm talking about later, that they're piping in crowd noise. And it doesn't make any sense to me. It sounds horrible. It looks horrible. And it's an overt reminder of how fucking weird it is what we're doing right now. Oh, this wasn't weird enough that there's nobody in here for this fucking exciting fight. Let's pipe in some fucking sitcom laugh track or some fucking, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we gotta stop doing that shit. But anyways, as far as the fight went, Sorungvisai beat Chocolatito twice, then beat Juan Francisco Estrada, and then lost to Estrada. Since those fights, Chocolatito has made a comeback. I think he's moved up to 115 and has gotten some really nice wins, been much more effective. Sorungvisai in this fight, to me, looked very, very caught off guard by the speed. He didn't really know what to do with it. He couldn't get off the way he wanted to. He couldn't be aggressive the way he wanted to, because every time he would go to move in, this guy would pop, pop, pop. So really quick. They weren't hard shots, but they were just sort of they would just sort of stop him from getting going, But he eventually, he started to come on. His superior strength and punching power took over the fight, and he was able to win a decision. Based off that, though, I don't know if he beats either of those guys right now, Chocolatito or Estrada. He looked a little flat, and it looked like he doesn't really have a plan B if he's not able to completely overwhelm you with his offense and his power. So I would say good, not great performance. The next weekend, it was weird because the card on the 1st was on a Saturday, and so in my head, I was just kind of assuming that, we're doing this on Saturdays now. And then Hearn puts the card on Friday. So I don't know if they're going to be doing Fridays or Saturdays, or if they're just going to be mixing it up, or if they're going to do both. But it's one of those things where you can't rely on a schedule right now. So I think, us as fans, we just kind of have to be more on top of when the fights are and where they're on. You know what I mean? It's a new business model. So as opposed to, big fights making a lot of money, there's just more boxing going on all the time now. And that's kind of the new revenue model, is just to keep these guys busier. So the second card, there were some good fights on the undercard, but the one that's really worth talking about is Terry Harper's first defense of her 130-pound belt against Natasha Jonas, junior lightweights. This fight right here, as far as I'm concerned, is fight of the year so far. And there's a lot of fights in the last few months to go off of. There aren't a lot of title fights. This is probably the most actually significant fight that's been on so far. And the pace on this thing was just silly, man. Jonas is 36, Harper is 23. And Harper is so long and skilled. I didn't think that, I didn't know anything about Natasha Jonas going in, but in my mind, you have to be really good to get to Terry Harper, just from what I've seen. Her feet are great. She's so tall and long for that weight that it's like, if she really wants to keep you outside and keep you on the end of the jab and keep you frustrated, she can do that. But Jonas had the fast twitch, the counter punching, the power. She had all those things. And so anything Harper had, she had equally in return, if not more. And as far as rounds, I felt like it was even, and I felt like it was fair. But if I was looking at the cumulative, punishment and effect of the fight, I would think Harper took the worst of it. That's not how you score a fight, so I don't know how relevant that is, but it felt like Natasha Jonas had her number. Even if the rounds were even, it felt like she had her number, particularly on that back end of the fight where, the last 2-3 rounds, she buzzed her multiple times. But Hearn was saying, we want to do a rematch of this. It looks like both girls want to do a rematch. I hope they do it now because Jonas is 36 years old. And I think this might have been either her first or her second title shot. Maybe her first. She was a big amateur fighter. She doesn't have that many professional fights. She's 9-1-1 with 7 knockouts. Harper 10-0-1 with 5 knockouts. So, they both have decent power. It was amazing that neither of them went down. And they both have good defense too, relative to what was coming at them. They make most of it. They would negate most of it. But yeah, this was a wild pace on this fight, man. This is one, if you didn't get a chance to go watch it, this is one you really want to watch. This right here is why you watch boxing, basically, is this kind of fight. So, big shout out to Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas. Last fight I'm going to talk about this week is the welterweight matchup, the PBC matchup in Connecticut between Jamal James and Thomas Delorme. These guys, as far as welterweights, obviously welterweights kind of the money division of boxing. As far as welterweights, these guys are not top 10 necessarily, but they're right under that. They're sort of like the first guys off the bench. James 27-1, 12 knockouts. Delorme 25-4-1, 16 knockouts. The first half of the fight, Delorme was really kind of walking James down and hitting him with hard shots, man. He fucked up his nose early in the fight. He was fucking up his hair. It was looking, for the first 5-6 rounds, it really looked like, for the most part, that James was kind of struggling his way through it. But I have to give it to him. He really stuck with the game plan, and he kept his defense tight. Even when he would get hit, it wouldn't fluster him, and he wouldn't get buzzed. He would sort of stay in the pocket and just keep making Delorme miss, because Delorme would catch him with a good one, and he'd want to follow up. But most of the time when he would follow up, he would miss all those shots. And it was really impressive, man. James just sort of stayed the course and stayed a little busier, and his feet are so effective and he's so long that by the 7th, 8th round, Delorme kind of looked confused. It looked like he wasn't sure of what to do anymore. He looked a little lost. And to be honest with you, I thought Delorme kind of had more of the whole package than James going into this fight. It felt to me, especially having seen Delorme against more top guys, it felt to me like, this is now the first like legit contender other than Ugas that Jamal James is fighting. And so if he loses to Ugas, how does he do with this guy? And he really stuck with it, man. He stuck with his defense. He kept everything tight. He kept making Delorme miss even when he would catch shots that definitely hurt him. And he just kind of gave him a boxing lesson the second half of the fight. Those first 6 rounds, maybe you have it 3-3, 4-2 Delorme. But that back half of the fight, there's like 1-2 rounds for Delorme. Anyway, you cut it up. It's a close fight, but clearly the right guy won. And I think the scorecards were pretty accurate and fair. So, from what I can see, now that I've seen him in with Delorme and with DeMarco and some more, some consistent guys. Like, what you're getting with these guys. You're in for a tough fight. And he's down for a tough fight. He's I keep feeling like I have questions about his durability, but then he doesn't get buzzed and he doesn't go down. So I would say he's a very durable guy. He's very long. He's very mobile. He has a weird rhythm. It's very herky-jerky. It's hard to kind of catch, what's his game plan, what's his vibe here. It's a little random. He's tricky to deal with, and he looks like less than what he is. It's like the sum is way greater than the parts with him. Whereas some guys, the parts are way greater than the sum. Like, they have more natural ability and athleticism, but their boxing skills and IQ don't match that. I think this guy's IQ way exceeds his physical talent, and that's how he's able to win these fights. So I was impressed, man. I was impressed. He hung in with a tough, hard-hitting, durable contender that's been in there with the top of the top and schooled him for the back half of the fight. So big ups to Jamal James and, everything he's doing for the city of Minneapolis, man. A lot of respect for that, man. And that's it, guys. That's episode 13 of the Slip Week podcast. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I appreciate all of you, and I'll catch you next week. Peace.